Yeah, I know. I always read
Would you like to take a seat? We're going to start. Good morning, everybody, on this really frigid day. Thank you for coming out and bearing the weather. Will you please silence your cell phones? And I will turn it over to Paul, who's going to finish up from his presentation from last week and then take us into who is an American today. But his overarching topic is political tribalism, well, tribalism in politics and identity politics in America. So Paul, it's the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Turn it on, it's probably muted.
Testing? Yep. Okay. For a moment, you can leave it on, I think. For a moment, I was afraid she said, I'm going to be sure you silence the speaker. Well, good morning, friends. And don't tell me you're not my friends, because no one tells me who my friends are. Anyway, this is a song and dance. Third class. I didn't finish the second class, and I may make you a promise that if I don't cover all the material, I'll carry it over into the next class. So that's what I'm doing today. But also, as new things occur to me, and I'm going to start off with that takes some extra time. So there's a good chance I'm not going to finish what I prepared for the third class, which I will then carry into next week, the fourth class. So what I didn't talk about, but it occurred to me that I really should, is why are we talking about groups, special interest groups, or even not, or even looser groups than that, as tribes, or that groups that eventually evolve into tribes? Well, I need to give you some history about the 1960s. Even though we mature folks lived through that period, more recent history may bump some of our memories so that we don't recall some of the important things that happened. The 1960s, especially as it slid into the 1970s, was a very turbulent time. And I have a whole list here of things that happened. The 1960s were a turning point in America. Counterculture development among young people, the war in Vietnam. And let's start with, there's no particular order. There are just a lot of things that happened in the middle to late 60s. Do you remember the trial of the Chicago Seven at the Democratic National Convention in 1968? Student protests, the yippies, the 8 actually, they started the 8 yippies who were prosecuted for protesting during the National Convention, simply mirrored what was going on across the world. There were student protests and strikes at the same time across France, Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, for the rights of minorities, immigrants, the status of women, environmentalism. In this period, groups were active. The yippies at the Chicago 8 were the Youth International Party, YAP, which is why we call them yippies.
Excuse
I'm very sorry for the interruption.
Okay, welcome. The 1963 Civil Rights March, the I Have a Dream March with Martin Luther King, the Manson family, 1969, the Stonewall riots, 1969, the National Organization for Women, 1966. The Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, voting rights, and many other, and Medicare, Medicaid, and many other political reforms were introduced through his administration, which, by the way, all of these involved groups of one way or another, including Medicare. When you were over 65, then it became an identity. You were old. You may not have known it, but you were. The Voting Rights Act, the folk music revival that I love so much. The communes. Do you remember how young people went to live on communes? And that was all through the 1960s into the 70s. So it was also a late 69 phenomenon. Prior norms of social life were overturned through the counterculture. Long hair, natural hair, wearing of jeans, the miniskirt, the advent of yoga spread, new wave films, end of censorship, the Hays Code of movies. People began, and here's the critical sentence for all of this. People began to be judged not on their character or their abilities, but on assumptions about them as members of groups. So if you were, and we do that today, if we find well, just listen to what J.D. Vance had to say about poor Renee Good, who was slaughtered in Minneapolis. He said, "We have every reason to believe that she was an Antifa activist." Did you catch that when he was talking?
What's an Antifa?
Anti-fascist, but it's been abbreviated as Antifa. And she was a terrorist. Okay, you take an individual, and that person, by whatever behavior, becomes emblematic of a group. That's exactly what happened in his statement. Okay, and you see it all the time, especially when acts of terrorism or hate occur. Then people are considered to be part of a group in which everyone thinks that way, and therefore they acted that way. Groups have become important. The most visible tribe is the present administration in the White House. Just a few more. Theodore Lowy, do you remember that name? In 1969, he wrote a book which was widely heralded and much discussed on interest group liberalism in government. And that's when Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali, and the Nation of Islam became important and Black Power arose to become important as well. All right, so those are some of the reasons why we now talk about groups as tribes, whether they are loose tribes or close-knit tribes. Let's move on then to talk about who is an American, because this has become an issue, as you may recall, of recent statements by President Trump that he wants to remove birthright citizenship from immigrants. That's been a source of great heartburn for a lot of people. There are two ways to become a citizen. So I ask you, what are they?
Born here, naturalized.
Yes, I don't know if everybody heard, Jim, but if you're born in America, and if you're naturalized. At least he hasn't taken away naturalization. I don't think he's going to take away birthright citizenship either. All right. I don't want to take our time because this was, again, part of last class. But please look at the handouts. Now, just a reminder, if you don't have handouts at home, these things that I'm putting on the screen, you can have them. Just let me know, and I'll email them to you. But I'm not, come to me afterwards so I can write it down. Whoops, what happened here? Nope. Okay. Okay. So there's a great deal here about what citizenship entails. So the question is even deeper than whether you're born here or you're naturalized here. American Indians were not citizens. They were not considered to be American until, does anybody know when that changed? 1924. Relatively recently, then a law was enacted to allow American Indians, Native Americans, to become American, to become part of us. Pardon?
Isn't that crazy?
The government does a lot of crazy things. Okay, so what if you are an American? What do we expect of you, and how do you behave? There is an American creed, and we have a national identity. Have you noticed if you go to another country and you haven't been thinking about the fact that you're an American, and then you encounter a culture that's quite different, it makes you remember that you're an American? That happened to me when I was young and unaware of these things. And I was going to college in Buffalo, New York. And a friend and I drove to Toronto, which was only 100 miles away in Canada from Buffalo, to see the Metropolitan Opera on tour or traveling. And they played the Star-Spangled Banner. And I just quelled. I just became, it was a patriotic moment that I never knew I was going to experience. So we have a national identity, and that was portrayed in story as the ugly American, as seen through foreign eyes, and so on. But so, what is our American creed? I bet you don't. If I asked you, you wouldn't enunciate what the American creed is, because it's not something we think about, but it's something we internalize. We grow up in America very much in tune with what Americans believe and how they behave. So there's no one set of beliefs and behavior that's been widely accepted. Thomas Jefferson offered these ideals as part of an American creed: liberty, equality, individualism, populism, laissez-faire economics. In 1918, the House of Representatives passed a resolution, and somebody did write an American creed, which is pretty long, so I won't read it. What I do want to point out, however, is that the noted American historian Samuel Huntington published a book in 2004 with the title, "Who Are We? The Challenges to America's National Identity." And his view of the American creed as the core of our identity embodies the principles of as follows: liberty, equality, individualism, sounds like Thomas Jefferson, but he goes on: representative government, private property, Anglo-Saxon law and heritage. And this emphasis on Anglo-Saxon elements that creep into American beliefs and behavior caused a lot of people to criticize Huntington. But when you think about it, there's a lot that's true there. Even our laws are based on Blackstone's laws, and Blackstone was the great English jurist. English is the national language, which it's not officially. It never got official recognition or appointment as the national. We have no national language. But we believe that English should be. The Protestant emphasis on individual freedom of opinion, religion, and the work ethic, an opposition to hierarchy and the embrace of democratic norms in government. Huntington sought to have immigrants identify primarily with America rather than the country of their birth, learn English, and participate in American life. He was unhappy with Americans in business or intellectual or professional opinions and academia who saw themselves as members of an international community and not as citizens of the United States. What's the bottom line? It appears that Huntington is closest to the way that a great many Americans see themselves and apply that judgment to others. We're often unaware of our own identity, but we react adversely when we see others who don't embrace it. This may also explain why so many Americans are unhappy with immigrants who don't Americanize and cause them to turn against immigration and immigrants. Okay, before we move off of this discussion, I just want to point out that America, from the very get-go, has been very unfriendly to foreigners, not at the very outset, nor during a period in the mid-1800s when we were trying to settle the Great Plains, and railroads were being built, canals before that were being built, and we were hospitable to immigrants as workers. During World War II, we were hospitable to Mexicans who came in the hundreds of thousands to work in America to replace those people who had gone to war, but under contracts, but not as immigrants, not just simply as temporary guests who could work here and then return to their native land. The braceros of the 1940s, and that's all immortalized a little bit in a song that Woody Guthrie wrote about Mexicans who were being deported since they overstayed their work contract and the plane crashed. And when the radio talked about the crash, they just called the people in the plane deportees. And he was quite incensed that their names were not given. So he gave them to us in his song, Deportee, a great song of Woody Guthrie that everybody from Joan Baez to Judy Collins to you know who, anybody, including me, has sung. So anyhow, that's, but if you look at the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1892, that excludes not only Chinese but Filipinos, and if you look at the gentleman's agreement that Theodore Roosevelt instituted, barring people from Japan coming to the United States, and the fact that Filipinos were not allowed here until World War II. The terrific, and I mentioned this last class, but I'll say it again, the terrific clamping down on immigration to the point of almost removing it entirely during the 1920s. The most dreadful immigration act was 1924, when America decided that anybody from Southern Europe or Eastern Europe was persona non grata, and they were barred from coming to America. And that was Italians, Poles, Hungarians, Jews, Russians, you name it. Only the Nordic and Western European, Northern and Western European countries could allow their people to come here as immigrants. Because it was based on a quota system. And one of the interesting things about the 60s, again, in 65, getting back to Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society, is that he, under his administration, the immigration law of 1965 reversed the quotas of 1924. Those quotas are what kept Jews fleeing from the Holocaust refusal to come here, and all of the dreadful stories about that. Because they didn't come here as Jews, they came here as Germans, and Germans were not allowed in at the time. Okay, I'll stop here just for a moment for any questions or comments before we move into today's agenda.
What you're describing is this domination by Congress of the image that we have. But all over the country, there were many subgroups who disagreed with that. I mean, when you look at Italians in Boston, New York with its many groups, there are all kinds of nationality groups that organized themselves and were successful in local politics. Not to say about Congress. And finally, a lot of what you described also is racism, because you didn't talk about African Americans being excluded from the polity, even though they're born here.
Yes, racism was very much a factor, and it still is. If you were not a white person, you were considered to be of a separate race altogether. Germans were a race. Jews from Eastern Europe were considered to be a race. The Irish were considered to be a separate race. And of course, all those were negative perceptions and actions taken on that basis. And yes, there were groups that did not agree with Congress, but unfortunately, Congress ran America when it came to immigration. So they prevailed, not the groups. Okay, I saw another hand. Yes, Gail.
I'm just curious, Paul, why were the Filipinos excluded?
Well, because they were Oriental, and Oriental people were excluded. There was the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Japanese Gentlemen's Agreement Act. So Filipinos were part of the Asian community that were all considered to be not welcome.
Now they're citizens.
Well, things have changed, obviously. There's also the fact that I trust everybody is aware that in the war with Spain in 1898, and when we became more imperialistic than we were, because we won Puerto Rico, Guam, Samoa, the Marianas, and the Philippines, that when the war with the Spanish-American War was over, the Philippine War was underway, and it was another about 14 years of awful warfare, worse atrocities than we saw in Vietnam. Yes.
It just seems to be human nature to create a pecking order. We're better than those people. I don't know why we tend to be that way, but it just seems that's part of our reality.
Yes. Yes, that's true. Okay, anybody else before we move on? Jim?
The story of the Chinese in Deadwood, South Dakota. They were considered unseemly to appear in public, so they dug tunnels so they could get from place to place.
Oh, interesting. I had never heard that. Thank you. Jim, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, to bring things to the present time, I remember, as a kid, we'd say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in class, in school. Right now, I damn near choke in trying to say that with any meaning. I was so impressed with the Martin Luther King speech that we listened to yesterday when he was talking about one of the three sins of America is our militarism. And I noticed last night at the football game of the national championship how much I relished hearing America the Beautiful and wishing that were our national anthem instead of the militaristic national anthem that we have at the present time. It's very difficult to be a proud American with the leadership that we have at the present time.
Yes, I was going to comment on that, and I still will. By the way, you know, there's been a movement for quite a few years to make America the Beautiful the national anthem, and it always fails. There's just too much tradition and too much investment in the Star Spangled Banner. And it's harder to sing the Star Spangled Banner, which is one of the reasons people give for wanting America the Beautiful. Okay, Francis Fukuyama, the very eminent philosopher and political scientist, has a whole statement on national identity. And today, our national identity is quite embarrassing. Is it not? Yes. That people who, you know, and there are some people who've actually done what many people have said they would like to do and gone to another country to escape America. Because national, and I'll read you what Fukuyama had to say, national identity begins with a shared belief in the legitimacy of the country's political system. That's his first sentence. And we can take a vote on whether we think that's okay today. As embodied in laws and institutions, these cover the educational system, a national language, the prevailing culture, and basic values. It includes memories of history and stories that tell about the people themselves, where they come from, what they celebrate, and what it takes to be a genuine member of the community. It may create inclusive, common experiences which enable diverse communities to thrive and unite. And this engenders loyalty, pride, and striving to protect it. And that's where we are today, striving to protect it. Okay, I just have one more thing to say about the second class, and that is I gave you a table which I'm not going to go into, but it's a breakdown of identity of all sorts of different groups, the roles they play in society, the positive symbolism that you might get from Democrats and the negative symbolism that you might get from Republicans and their political effects. So this is quite a full house. Pardon?
You gave those out to everybody?
I post, for your information, I post all of the handouts on the forum for people to download a week ahead, and invite you, if you would like a set, which I can make up and give to you, to let me know when the class is over. Okay, moving on. We are now in class 3. Let it be recorded. Okay, class 3, curiously, is about partisanship and polarization. Okay, so I'm going to read some of this out. I read it over here, it's easier. Anthropologists recognize the basic value of tribalism because for all of the hundreds of thousands or even longer of years that Homo sapiens has been around, we have evolved, we have been able to continue evolving because of tribal life. Family groups and individuals had to band together for hunting, shelter, protection, transfer of skills, adaptation to different kinds of living conditions, and social learning. They did this in groups we now call clans. Through exchanges and collaboration with other clans, broader networks were formed that we call tribes. Tribal living has been the source of cultural learning, change, and progress for tens of thousands of years. Tribal living has made us truly human. It enabled our evolutionary ascent and still underlies some of our great achievements today. But there's another tribal dynamic that's dysfunctional, creating conflicts among groups as tribes by their nature are protective and favorable to their own members, but can be destructive to those outside of their borders, especially if those others are regarded as threats or enemies. This is toxic tribalism. I will be talking about this. In America today, we are witnessing such toxicity in our political and social life through damaging partisanship and societal polarization. So there are some basic tribal instincts that anthropologists have identified, and they are common to all tribes, as well as the moral foundations that separate our two major American political tribes, Democrats and Republicans. America, by the way, is a two-party system, no matter how many other parties arise to compete. None have ever surpassed the two-party system. So those two parties are quite tribal. All right, but this now is a generalization. By the way, everything I say, as you must understand, is a generalization. So if you find examples of things that disagree with what I'm telling you, that's okay. But the prevailing truth is what I'm generalizing. All right, 3 tribal instincts, and that you find in mafia, criminal organizations. You find it among professionals. You find it everywhere. You find it here in this institution. So there are 3 tribal instincts that are always universal, apparently, also called codes that are perpetuated in all tribes. They sustain cultures of different kinds and at different times, whether they be religious, occupational, community, organizational, as for example in business corporations. Each one is triggered by relevant situations and the inner needs of individuals. And first of the 3, the peer instinct. Conforming to the practices, habits, and thinking of other members of the clan or tribe. All right, just to add to that, last time I was talking about the typology of groups, and after loose groups, you had the special interest groups. Well, what this is saying right now is the beginning of a tribe is a special interest group. Not all special interest groups are tribes, but all tribes are special interest groups. So you do have practices, habits, and thinking that are pretty universal in every tribe. Originally, this instinct was useful in enabling tribal members to hunt game, evade predators, seek mates, and build homes tent gardens or animals, and so on. We see this today in political groupthink. Groupthink is when we all think the same way. And in party conformity at political rallies, if you see people gathered around a politician, you see that very much in Donald Trump's political rallies. Adoring, hundreds of adoring, or maybe thousands of adoring people, cheering him on and reacting very positively to everything he says. And legislative behavior. All right, you have Republican tribalism, Democratic tribalism, and Green Party tribalism, or any other party that is a significant special interest group. The second instinct, that's what they call them, the hero instinct. A tribe's history will always spotlight individuals who are inspirational. They may be leaders in government or citizens of special accomplishment. We may remember what they said, what they did, how they acted when faced with duress or sacrificed themselves for country or fellow members. All right, would we put Charlie Kirk in that category?
I wouldn't, but others would.
Pardon?
I wouldn't, but others would.
You wouldn't, but others would, yes. Of course. We have to recognize, I mean, you don't have to put him there, but we have to recognize that's where he is. That he was an inspiration. He was a hero. He is a hero. Martin Luther King. Who else? Other heroes.
Barack Obama.
What?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. Nelson Mandela.
Kennedy.
John
Kennedy.
Not RFK Jr.
No.
No. Okay.
Somebody said Mahatma Gandhi.
And Mahatma Gandhi, of course. So the hero instinct, a tribe's history will always spotlight individuals who are inspirational and emblematic of the values and the goals of the tribe. They may be leaders, and we may remember what they said, what they did, how they acted, or sacrificed themselves. We are often motivated to emulate them and gain status and self-satisfaction. Such heroes may set examples for whole sections of society to emulate, to gain skills, to uphold ideals, and distinguish themselves. Now, if you do not agree with a particular tribal group's values and goals, of course, you won't do what I just read. You would not want to uphold their ideals and emulate their skills and so on. But those people in the tribe will want to do that, whether you agree with them or not. And that's just the nature of a tribal group. The ancestor instinct, and that's really about tradition. This is our propensity to value traditions. Societies and communities have many distinctive traditions that are treated as sacred and upheld through generations. We've always done it this way as a common cultural expression. Traditions can preserve important lessons. They become cultural rituals that are comforting. Now, I've given you some examples. Christmas trees, lights and bells. Thanksgiving family dinners with turkey. Passover seders, weddings in June, singing the national anthem at games, and so on. Each tribe has its own traditions. Okay, now what I want to do is talk about the left, and I will be doing this for the right as well. There's been political partisan disagreement. The word conflict is applicable in America since colonial times, whatever names the parties called themselves over the centuries. We've had revolutionary and anti-revolutionary parties, pro-slavery and anti-slavery parties, pro-constitution and anti-constitution parties, and so on, pro-diversity and inclusion and anti-diversity and inclusion. Regardless of the names they call themselves, there are only two major parties, however. One was more liberal, the left, and the other was more conservative, the right. Citizens who have been adherents of one or the other have taken on the identities associated with the party ideologies. This is more evident these days than in the past. And individuals have themselves become embroiled in the conflicts. Well, today, polarization is what we call this kind of conflict. And we'll be talking more about that in depth. This class right now, this particular reading will focus on the left, the Democratic Party, through the 20th century and into the present. It is important to note that liberalism has from the beginning embraced the value of change based on human reason. The left has evolved as political and social dynamics have changed. All right, so we have the old left. Now, many, if not all of us, were formed by the old left. And much of that is institutionalized in the Constitution. Classical liberalism, as opposed to current liberalism, was established through the Enlightenment that started in Great Britain of the 18th century. And it idealized a few conditions deemed essential to individual freedoms, such as social justice and individualism, popular sovereignty, the people choosing the governments and leaders, the social contract, property rights, the rule of law affecting how government is structured and performed, minimum government to ensure that it will not be powerful and oppressive, individual freedoms to the people, a free press, an independent judiciary, Republican government, that's a small r, Republican, with limited democracy and free trade. Americans who identify today with much of these elements are called libertarians, and there is a libertarian party. The most noted libertarian in Congress today is Rand Paul. His father was also in Congress. Okay, the evolution of liberal ideology. The Great Depression, World War II led to changes in liberal ideology. Individual freedoms have changed to wider human rights, applied to marginalized groups, not just individuals, groups such as blacks, women, Native Americans, immigrants, farmers, factory workers, unions, and so on. Isolation from the world and neutrality have changed to global alliances and military power. Civil rights and feminism drew many adherents. Government was seen as the means to elevate disadvantaged groups toward greater opportunity as well as actual equality. These views continued to be held by many older Americans. During the mid-century, the trend toward egalitarianism was misconstrued by many anti-communists as socialism and equated with communist doctrine. In the eyes of liberals, this threatened social justice, leading to political conflict. The left has continued, however, to evolve. Now we have the new left. The Nixon-Watergate imbroglio and the war in Vietnam alienated many younger Americans, leading them to distrust both government and corporate entities, including universities. This created further distrust in authority and capitalism, radicalizing the left. This was termed counterculture and led to estrangement of many younger Americans, along with political conflict. Going back to the Chicago 7 and the Yippies. College students led protests against war, for civil rights and feminism, a drug culture, and removal of sexual inhibitions. An embrace of direct action led to actual violence. Of late, the LGBTQ folks have focused on lifestyle and identity politics, which have expanded and divided the groups, industrial society, capitalism, and religious values. These days, these are discouraged. And lately, there's been a growing intolerance toward freedom of speech that is considered politically or personally offensive, and the removal of speakers, the cancel culture. Officials or academics whose viewpoints are not acceptable to students and considered microaggressions. Among adults, secularism is growing, causing a shrinkage in church attendance and the closing of churches. Suburbanization is increasing. New identities have emerged from splinter groups within the left, such as democratic socialists, the mayor of New York being an example, groups for black civil rights, female empowerment, environmentalism, Palestinians, and for mental health, for former prisoners, for gay and transgender rights, for veterans, and a variety of support and lobbying for ethnic groups, a variety of Asian nationalities, Latinos, Muslims, Jews supporting Israel, etc. Older splinters are New Democrats. New Democrats was something that came into being under Bill Clinton, who was considered to have triangulated old Democrats, new Republicans, creating New Democrats. A little of each was taken from old Democrats and new Republicans to become New Democrats. And Blue Dog Democrats. Does anybody know what Blue Dog Democrats are? Did you want to say, or shall I say?
Financially conservative.
Pardon?
Financially conservative.
Oh, yeah, all right. We have one vote for financially conservative Democrats. Okay. Socially conservative. All right. Socially conservative in this respect. They are against abortion. These are Democrats in Congress. Or they are against abortion. They are for gun rights, not against them. Robert Casey, our former senator, was a Blue Dog Democrat. He was a Democrat, but he was not for abortion, and he was not for anti-guns. Okay, and the reason they got the name Blue Dog is because they were shunned by other Democrats. They were out in the cold where they turned blue. I kid you not. That's the way it started. Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Let's get a mic.
I'm concerned with the phrase against abortion or pro-abortion. I think it is more pro-women's rights, pro the right of women to choose whatever they want to do. I'm not a pro-abortionist,
Right.
but I am for women's rights, and I think every woman has the right to choose whatever they want.
Well, that's usually said. Everybody hear that? That's usually what is said. In the same sentence, people will say abortion and women have a right to their bodies and what to do about it. They always say that. The problem is abortion is the word, and that was true of Kamala Harris as well, that she was talking about abortion, the name, the term, and that is what turns a lot of people off. That's the term, and that's what is said. And it's not, I mean, perhaps you're right. Perhaps it would have been better if you just don't say that and you just talk about women's bodies. And who could argue with that? But it isn't. Abortion is traditionally what we call it. In the few minutes we have left, I'll open the floor to anybody else.
Paul, when I visited my sister in southern Missouri, I realized that there have been divides in this country for a long time. Certainly the Civil War is a huge fault line. And I think sometimes we live in a bubble. In other words, what seems to me have happened that Trump is an exquisite manipulator of stuff that's been there a long time. And so I think that's something for us to remind ourselves of, that we live in a world that values complexity and actually has been tremendously affected by the 60s. And yet for much of the country, that's never been the case. And so I think we're not just simply talking about the rise of intolerance. We're talking about the fact that we live in a country that has always had differences. And I think they're now being exploited for political advantage.
Thank you, Phil. Anybody else? Okay.
You mentioned earlier on, and of course emphasized that the danger of all groups is their propensity to exclude and fear and hate the others. Well, I think that is really what is working here in all the cases. How can we create groups like ourselves in this room, I dare say? How can we create groups that truly listen to and understand from whence they came, as you just said? And where we learn what we do share as well as what we don't. And I think that's our major problem right now.
Thank you. Dallas has something to say.
I was thinking the other day that I would have to go back to the era of McCarthy. That was a troublesome time. And at one point, they wanted the teachers in Pennsylvania to sign a loyalty oath. And so our faculty decided we weren't going to do it. So we took a day off and went up to Harrisburg, and we had an audience with the governor, who was Hugh Scott at the time. He became later on our senator. And we said, we can lie and sign a loyalty oath, but it doesn't mean anything. And so we decided that we were not going to sign anything. And he disagreed with us, of course, because he was a Republican. But we told him our faculty had decided we weren't going to sign a loyalty oath. He didn't like it very much, but we felt that we had to do that, to stand up for
Yes.
them.
Thank you, Dallas. Yeah, it's amazing how turbulent so many periods have been in American society in our lifetimes. And as I said earlier, we sometimes forget about that because modern history, excludes that in our memories. I just want to say one further thing about polarization. Why is it that Republicans or Democrats today are more tribal than they have ever been? And the answer that I can think of is that because they have lost many moderates and people of different values. For example, Republicans like Jacob Javits or Nelson Rockefeller, people we now call liberal Republicans, are no longer people in the Republican Party. Even so-called moderate Republicans are an endangered species. Susan Collins of Maine is an example of a moderate Republican. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. These are the people who are bucking the president, but may not remain in office very long. And then who's left? The most either the most avid in terms of the same set of values or groupthink, as I said earlier, or the people who are, as many Republicans have been called in Congress today, cowards, and who don't want to buck the president. And the same thing on the side of the Democrats. The blue dog Democrats were a different kind of Democrat. And at one point, there might have been 40 or 50 of them in Congress, and now there's just a handful or less. So that kind of evaporation causes the group to become much more coherent in their values, whatever they are, as a more closely knit, bonded tribe than they ever were before, which is a reason for this kind of polarization that now separates people from getting together for Thanksgiving dinners or intermarriage. You know, it used to be black-white intermarriage, now it's Republican-Democrat.
Yeah, this will be the last question.
I would just like, I just want to raise one question. A lot of people say that the independents are the fastest growing party in America. And I would just like to throw that out to think about, can the independents create a tribe in some way? Because that's where a lot of people are going. That's where a lot of people are going to, the independent political persuasion.
There's an article, I think it's in today's Washington Post. There's an article about independence. And the article is essentially saying to us, a lot of people are wrong about independence. You should not think that they're moderates. They're just people who can't stand one party or the other, but they are fellow travelers to the party. In other words, if they are leaning in the way polling treats them as either Republicans or leaning Republican, Democrat or leaning Democrat, and those are the independents. So they have political goals, but not to believe that they're really moderates or centrists. They may be very radical, but they still don't want to belong to a party. Okay, on that note, I'll end this party. Thank you very much.
Come back next week.
Can you tell me his name?
I'd like to say yes.